During Lent at Kenilworth Union Church this year, we're preaching this sermon series called God's Odd Benedictions, about the Beatitudes with which Jesus launches the Sermon on the Mount. Today, Matthew 5, verse 8. Blessed are the pure in heart, says Jesus, for they shall see God. Pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Blessed are the pure in heart, says Jesus, for they will see God. It's the sixth benediction. That word pure Jesus uses there means the same in ancient Greek as it does in English today, as when we say her heart was pure gold. We mean to say that her heart is unalloyed by any traces of zinc or iron or lead or whatever else it is that makes gold less than 24 karat. Her heart is unadulterated. It's free from flame and stain and fleck. There's only one thing in there, nothing else. No alloys, additives, preservatives, contaminants, nothing false, nothing unclean. They are like Dany Targaryen's troops. They are the unsullied. There's only one thing in there, and that one thing in there is God. For Jesus, God is one and God is all. So God overflows her heart to surplus. There's room for nothing else in her heart but God. One of the way English-speaking people talk about the pure in heart is with the word integrity. It's one of the highest compliments we can give a person. He has massive integrity, we say. We mean to say that he is not for sale. We mean to say that his honesty is unbending. We mean to say that he will always tell us the truth no matter what. And of course, the English word integrity is adjacent to that other word, integer, which means a whole or a round or a natural number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. No decimal place, no fraction. It's whole. It's one thing. The hearts of the pure have integrity. They are undivided. They are not fractions. St. Augustine said, "When I took my eye off of you, O God, the one good, I lost myself in a multiplicity of things." Isn't that a priceless phrase? I lost myself in a multiplicity of things. Anybody here dance to that beat? The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote this slim, beautiful little book called Purity of Heart is to Will One Thing. And he warns us about what happens to us when we lose ourselves in this multiplicity of things. He calls those kind of people not double-minded, but thousand-minded. You know how we are, right? We want to have it all. We want to see it all. We want to do it all. We want to see Paris and Bangkok and Taylor Swift and the title to a Tesla and opening night on Broadway and a 4 handicap on the golf course. The lights, the glitter, the action, the corner office. But Dr. Kierkegaard warns us about losing ourselves in this multiplicity of things. He talks about the emptiness behind the manyness of life, the emptiness behind the manyness. So let me take a little brief tangent here and say a good word for duplicity, to remind us that we can't have an unbending purity of heart, right? We can't be entirely unalloyed, because deception and duplicity have an honored place in human commerce. Right? We can't always tell the truth. If you're married, you know this. The British poet George Herbert says, all truths are not to be told. Yeah? All truths are not to be told. A man and his wife were going out to a fancy dinner party. They're on their way out the door, and he turns to her and says, "You're wearing that?" And she was mad. She threw a book at him, and it was War and Peace. And he said to her, I thought our relationship was based on honesty. And she said, our relation is not based on honesty. It's based on flattery, and it's going downhill fast. Duplicity has an honored place in church. You know, you may have sat through yet another of the many sermons preached from this pulpit which go into orbit around the wrong planet. And I take a connecting flight to get to my point. And you don't tell me what you're thinking. When you shake my hand after church, you say something gentler like, well, that was interesting. Or in sport, you can't have sports without duplicity. The whole game of football is based on deception. The quarterback option, the reverse, the draw play, the fake punt, the stutter step to the sideline in a perfectly chiseled pass pattern. Even the huddle is duplicity, keeping secrets. Can't have football without duplicity. Or baseball. The whole game of baseball is based on lies and secrets, right? Third base coach looks like he's brushing lint off his shoulder when he's really telling the base runner to steal second base, to steal second. I am aghast. And the pitch out, that's just deception responding to deception. And the changeup is nothing but a naked lie. The batter is up there expecting a 96-mile-an-hour fastball, and the ball comes floating up to the plate as if it's driving on a street in a school zone, and the batter has already swung, missed, struck out, cursed, thrown his bat, and sat down in the dugout before the ball gets to the plate. Charles Eliot was for many years president of Harvard University, and one of those years Harvard had a great baseball season. And after the season, Dr. Eliot announced that he was going to cancel baseball for the next year. Never liked sports attached to higher education institutions anyway. And when they asked him why he was going to cancel baseball, he said, well, I understand Harvard had a great baseball season this year because one of our pitchers has an exceptional curveball. And they tell me that a curveball is meant to deceive, and surely that's not a habit we want to cultivate at Harvard University. Perhaps Dr. Eliot was tyrannized by an over-scrupulous conscience. So in those small ways, in marriage, in church, in sports, it's okay for us to have a divided heart, to keep secrets, to fail to tell the truth, but not in the larger matters of life, right? In life, we have to live in an undivided way. You know how in ancient drama among the Romans and the Greeks, the same actor would play multiple roles in the same play? And so to tell the audience what role he was playing at that moment, he would wear a mask, switch off masks now and then in the play. Some of us live life like that. We have one face for the family and another face for our colleagues and a third face for our friends at the church. We can't live like that. The unalloyed can't live like that. Their intentions match their actions. One last thing, and then I'll quit. This is a point of personal privilege. As a congregation, you cared for me so beautifully when my best friend Phil died in January. Some of you knew Phil. You went to Israel with him. You went to Scotland with him. And I appreciated your kindness so much because on the face of it, this event in my life was not so tragic, right? I mean, he was just my friend. He wasn't my father or my brother. He was 76 years old. He died in his sleep. He'd never been sick a single day in his life except for an Achilles tendon and a serious case of COVID. But when I think of the unalloyed, I think of my friend Phil. Jesus would have said of him, "Behold, an Israelite in whom there is no guile, an Israelite in whom there is no deception. What you see is what you get." He was the chief of surgery at Greenwich Hospital. When he was a kid, he was a three-sport athlete at St. Lawrence University. He's in the Hall of Honor there. Never touched tobacco or alcohol. He loathed alcohol because of the chaos it wrought in the lives of many of his friends. So many, many, many nights he would stay up all night doing 3 emergency gallbladders at the hospital, and then at 6 o'clock in the morning he'd hit the road to Princeton to watch his son play golf. And I've also told you about my friend George, who became a surrogate grandfather to my children when we lived in Greenwich. George had been an only child, no brothers or sisters, never married, no children, completely alone in the world except for Kathy and me, his adopted family. When George was 85 years old, he got seriously ill with cancer, and he was facing complicated surgery, which is a real problem for Kathy and me because we were on our way out of town to do a mission trip in Honduras. We couldn't care for him. And so we had to have this difficult conversation about rehabilitation facilities. And we said, George, you can't come home to your one-bedroom apartment all by yourself. You have to get well in one of these places. And he said, I'm not going to one of those infernal institutions. People die there. And we'd push back and say, George, I have to get well with other people. And he'd push back, and this back and forth went on for about 10 minutes. And then Phil, my friend Phil, jumped in with a solution. He said, George, why don't you come over to 96 Perkins Road for about 7 days and get well? And George said, I'm not going to any place called 96 Perkins Road. George didn't know that 96 Perkins Road was Phil's home. And so George spent 7 days in the home of the chief of surgery at Greenwich Hospital. Later, Phil's wife Linda told Kathy and me that Phil got up one night at 3 a.m. to change out a bloody catheter. Surgeons don't change catheters. Near the end of the week, when George was getting better, feeling good, Phil came up to George and said, George, tomorrow morning we're going to go for a ride in the countryside in my 1965 Ford Mustang. We'll put the top down. So sure enough, the next morning when Phil got up, there was George sitting in the living room wearing a tie and a 3-piece suit because he was going for a ride with the chief of surgery at Greenwich Hospital. It was a magnificent day. Sun was shining, wind in their face. They stopped at a hot dog stand for a chili dog. George says, what's this? I've never seen one of these before. You have to experience a chili dog before you die. So for a person like Phil, Jesus would say, blessed are the unalloyed, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God face to face.